Do you like to eat healthy? Yeah, me neither. Today's recipe comes to us courtesy of the French company in the 1940s. Now, when I think of the 1940s, I typically don't think of health food. However, apparently the French company was, because they put out this recipe for Slimster's guacamole. And instead of chips, you're dipping it with vegetables. Carrot sticks or celery or peppers or green onions or whatever you want to dip in this, but nowhere in the recipe are chips a thing. This is probably one of the simplest recipes to prepare anyway that I have done on this show yet, because you literally just throw everything into a blender and you're done. That's all there is to it. We're going to start out here with one medium avocado, which has been cut into pieces. And of course, you're not going to use the core of that, but you can just make kind of some cross marks here on the inside. Be careful not to cut through the skin so you cut your hand or anything like that. But we're going to put one whole avocado and then a tomato, which I've already prepared by taking the skin off of it and cutting that into small pieces as well. And I'm going to dump that whole tomato in there. Here's the secret ingredient. They say that it's supposed to use a cup of low-fat cottage cheese. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never had guacamole that has cottage cheese in it, so this is going to be an interesting ingredient for me. Not to mention the proportions of this. Usually guacamole is a very, very high content of the actual avocado, and not the other things that are in it. However, this only has the one avocado, and even with that tomato, the ratios are already off from what I would think of with a modern guacamole. But we got our cottage cheese in there. This is a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. And I also have 2 tablespoons here of lemon juice, freshly squeezed, and a teaspoon of garlic salt, and just a little bit of cayenne. This is an 1/8 teaspoon that it called for. And I'd like to remind everybody, I get a lot of comments sometimes from people saying, hey, you could have done this, you should have done this. I'm just being true to the original recipes. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, this is what the original recipe is. So when you're making this, feel free to adapt it however you want to. But we're staying true to the original recipes here. So I have everything in the blender. I'm just going to put a cover on that and then give it a blend and see what comes out. Before I even taste this, I've got to say, this is the strangest colored guacamole that I've ever seen in my life. It is not green at all. However, what colors I do have are these beautiful rainbow carrots. So we're going to use these as our dipping tool and see how the French company version of Slimster's guacamole tastes. Honestly, it doesn't taste like much. It's very neutral flavored. I honestly don't know what this really tastes like. It's got a little bit of a zing at the end, which I'm assuming is from the tiny bit of cayenne that's in there. Maybe the Worcestershire adds a bit of zing to it. But it's very neutrally flavored. It's definitely not what you think of when you think of guacamole. I don't know that I would call this a fail, but I would not make this again. It is very smooth, it is very creamy, it is a good texture for a dip, and I think the idea is a good idea, but it needs some flavor. It just doesn't taste like anything. The avocado gets completely lost in there with the creaminess from the cottage cheese, and the tomato is what gives it that pinkish color, I believe. but I don't taste the tomato in there either. All I really taste is that little bit of zing and the creaminess from the cottage cheese. So this is definitely unique. I don't believe I'll be making this again. However, if this is your jam, maybe give it a try and see what you think. Find a way to spice it up a little bit, add some more flavor to it. Maybe do twice the avocado so that you actually get a little bit more of a true guacamole feel. However, when I think 1940s, I don't think guacamole. So I'm sure that they didn't really even know what they were doing when they printed this. Because the closest thing to a guacamole that this is just that it has that avocado. And again, the ratios are way off for what we would call a modern guacamole today. If you go to a Mexican restaurant or even if you make your own guacamole at home. But this is unique. Give it a try and see what you think, or don't. But either way, we'll see you next time on Recipe Reviver.